Hi everyone. Alan and Keith look forward to sitting down with Uncle Pat as he celebrates his 90th birthday next week. And we're looking forward to asking him a series of questions about his incredible life, his faith, his family, and the experiences he has shaped who he is today. He and Patty have been married for 60 years and have enjoyed watching Roland and Lynn raise Logan, Landon, Melissa, and Meredith, and Chad and Jana raise Jackson and Laney. He has been a lifelong witness for Jesus Christ and a great example of a Christian family. He had a distinguished career in the United States Air Force, flying B-52s in Vietnam and rising to the rank of colonel. After retiring from the military, he continued as the Director of Air Transportation Office at the Ford Motor Company. Today, we'll get to hear some of his stories, lessons, and memories in his own words. It's a privilege to preserve this for our family and future generations. Uncle Pat, thank you for taking the time to share your journey with us.
Thank you for the opportunity to share how the Lord's blessed me and my family over the last 60 years or so, more than that, 90 years.
It's been wonderful to watch, even from a distance. All right, so the first series of questions about your early life and family history. What are your earliest childhood memories?
Well, I think, first of all, I put it in context. I was born and raised in Atlanta on the east side, natural birth, but I don't remember that. Of course, we moved into 1214 Glenwood, and I stayed there for 16 years. To kind of give you a background, well, we lived in a house with our grandparents, and it was about 2,400 square foot house on a lot of about 75 feet. The driveway on one side, and the house with a big porch, and a parlor, a bedroom, a dining room. As I go down, in the middle is a hall, and then there's a kitchen, and another bedroom, and a back porch. That was the house. The yard in the back was had a space for coal. People don't remember coal. We use that for heat, and I'll tell about that. We go further back, was a two-car garage. We had behind that was a space for two hunting dogs. Within that, there weren't pets; they were hunting dogs. On the right side back, we had chickens, 4 or 5 chickens, and we get eggs from. So that's kind of the layout. William and I lived in the back bedroom. My memory, we slept on a two-bed feather bed. And my earliest memories was it was like a futon. It was real soft, and you'd lay in it, and it would build up around you. Well, that didn't last too long because they finally got a regular bed. But my memories there were, must have been an old porch because it still had rafters in it. And my earliest memories there was William making airplanes and hanging them by strings, 4 or 5 airplanes like that. And so as a young sibling of his brother, I said, well, I'll make one too. So I did, but it wasn't as good as William's. Ironically, he didn't go into airplanes and I did. But anyway, this particular room was unique because it had a pot-bellied stove. And my task was to go get the coal and put it in there. Well, if you have any experience with that, you burn up on the inside against the stove and freeze on the back, so we're always rotating. But we lived like that till, well, I go back up, lived like this in the World War II, from 1940 to 1945. And when the war was over, we got gas heat in the floor between those two rooms, the kitchen and the bedroom. And this was a very favorite spot for my mother to stand, let her dress billow up with heat. She thought she'd died and gone to heaven and got rid of that coal thing. But in that period of time, it was dominated by the war. And of course, the domination there was not only family unity, but the country was unified. And so, and also in that time frame, 8 years old, I accepted Jesus as my personal Savior. And then shortly thereafter, around 9 years old, I had a ruptured appendix. I had a pain in my left side, and the doctor was a local family doctor, came to see me, gave me some laxative, and I passed out. Next thing I knew, I was in my ambulance going to Crawford Long Hospital for 6 weeks, with penicillin being the saving grace for me there. But in this time frame, the heat we had in the bedroom adjacent to we're going up to the house was floor heat. It was gas heat. In my next room was Aunt May, and then and Grandpa and Grandma. Now going back to Mom and Dad, you say, what kind of people were they? Mom was very dedicated soul. She was, I guess you like to say better words, a saint. She was very determined to raise her children in the Lord's by the Bible. She had me in church every Sunday, and only one time did I challenge her. I said, Mom, I'm not feeling too good this morning. I think I'll stay home. She said, oh, I'm sorry you're feeling bad. She says, if you feel that bad, I will just let you stay in bed all day. And I said, I don't think I want to stay in bed all day. I'm not feeling that bad. So I never tried that trick again. So, but anyway, another memory from there was the last time she bathed me. I was about 7, I guess, and she had a big old wash tub in the floor. And I got to get goofing around. She said, okay, it's time for you to start bathing. We only had one shower, tub, and that was in the hall, by the hall. So anyway, solid citizen Mama was, and she was the inspiration for me to go to college. And she thought that she and Dad had married too young and not had enough education to get a decent job. But now my dad was they called him Uncle Bud. His siblings called him Bud. And he was a friend to everybody. Everybody liked him. I never saw him mad or whatever. He's just a hard worker. He was too old, not old enough. I was too old to go into service in World War II. So he took some tests and became a machinist out at B-29s at Marietta for Boeing. And he liked that work, but when the war was over, he went back to selling insurance. He worked for his dad, Henry Brothers Insurance Agency, and but he never really liked it that much. But that was what put food on the table. So after the war, when the contracts ended, he went back to selling insurance, and that was that. But now going into the Grandpa and him, Grandpa set the pace for the whole house. He had a business. He was very professional, and he carried that over into the house. The whole house was organized.
This is W.E.
W.E. Yeah. William Edward Henry, and I never saw him let down and hoot and holler or fuss at anybody. But everybody knew who the man was, Grandpa Henry. When I knew him, he had a problem with his knee or something, so he had a cane. But I'll get into genealogy later. But then Grandma Henry, Frances Henry. They call her Aunt Fanny, and of course Grandpa was called Uncle Young. That's nicknames. But Aunt Fanny would talk to me, and she'd encourage me to be an entrepreneur, cut grass in the neighborhoods or stuff. And she had a habit of using strawberry snuff in her room. She didn't go around the house or whatever with it, but she'd do that occasionally. There's a little tidbit there. She talked to me, and I learned early on that they were listening to me. I was raised by adults, and they were listening to me, so I better not say something stupid, I'd get embarrassed. So that was a good thing. Aunt May, of course, was my next room to me. She was a sweetie pie. She was always cheerful, but she was always challenging my stupid comments or my assertions in a nice way. And one little incident with her, she had a weight issue. She worried about her hips being awful big for her, and she decided that she'd have me take a rolling pin, and she'd lay down and she'd take a rolling pin and roll her hips. So I did. I don't think it did any good, but I gave it a shot. But Anyway, I had to run to the house. The doors in our apartment were never locked, but I never saw Grandma and Grandpa come in, not ever. It was our spot, but I had free run. I could go in their rooms, whatever, the parlor, and that was nice. Now in the genealogy, the most extensive genealogy is my mother's in the Calloway family. And I heard lots of rumors and issues over the years about the Calloway brothers down in Washington, Georgia, that had come after the Revolutionary War and were given tracts of land because of their service. They stacked 1,000 acres each. It was Job, John, Joseph, and Jacob. And we come from the Job and John lane. And why that is because there's some cousins married in there that had the two of the brothers in the line of chain of command. From there on, there was Thomas Calloway, and it gets murky after that, after going through Chat GPT, etc. But the common issue was we think that we came in 1640 with Peter Calloway from England. Now on my dad's side, don't know too much about that. I went with Grandpa Henry one time to clear the grave of his parents, William Milton Henry, and this is up at Commerce, Georgia. And I went up there, and it was a rather unique cemetery plot because only one in the cemetery that had wrought iron fence around it, and it was based in concrete. It was a first-class unit. Milton was buried there. His wife was buried there. I think her name was Amanda, and as a child, early child. So I helped him clean up. That was the only time, and he gave me a Reese candy, and that was a big deal. I really liked that. But there again, he never asked me any questions anytime about my plans, what I was doing. He was just very, I don't say aloof, but I didn't feel like he was ignoring me. I was an adult, so he didn't talk to me too much. Let's see, on Grandma's side, she was a nun, and she had at least 4 siblings, maybe a fifth. I don't know that. But Aunt Leela, who was a mother of Aubrey and Clarence and Daisy, lived in town. And that issue there was beneficial to Aunt Leela because her husband had died in the 30s and also lost all of his wealth in the 30s. He had a lot of land holdings, but it's all borrowed money. And when the Depression hit, it folded. They had nothing, and then he died. So that left Aunt Leela destitute. And Grandpa Henry was noted for letting her have a house to live in. This is when they were back in Athens, I think. And Clarence and Aubrey, till their death, would tell me how Uncle Young had saved them from being split up into foster homes and stuff like that. On her parents, on her other siblings, there was 3 single siblings, Joe, Martha, and Billy. Joe had a big peach farm up in Alto, Georgia, and he never married, of course, and he used to joke about, well, he let a little bit of his chewing tobacco drip down on his face and turn the girls off, so that took care of that. He thought that was funny. But he had a horse named Sam that would be able to pull his carriage around, and we enjoyed riding that around, whatever. Aunt Martha, don't know nothing about her. And Uncle Billy sowed his wild oats out west most of his life. When he got old, he came back and lived with his brothers and sisters. So that takes care of the Henrys and the Calloways, nuns. Who else is left? I think that's it. What's the next question?
What kind of traditions or values from your family growing up still stick with you today?
Well, I didn't mention, but it was a very structured environment where we lived. We always met together for meals. We always prayed over our meals, and we always went to church. Now, Grandpa didn't go to church but on special occasion, so Dad didn't go to church on special occasions until toward the end of his life. He started going with Mama every day. I mean, every Sunday. It was in the Sunday school class. I'd go to church with him when I was in town, and he was really beneficial. That Aunt May was every Sunday. She was there. Grandma Henry, I don't know. She was sickly a lot, and it seemed like it was in the fall, winter time. She had sinus problems. Grandma lived to be 76 or so, and Grandpa Henry was about 71 or 2. Both died fairly young.
Mm-hmm. What was life like in your hometown when you were a boy?
Well, it was all focused on the war. Unity. We celebrated. I remember as a boy when we got bombed at Pearl Harbor. It was 51. No, 41. I got some reflectors. It said, "Remember Pearl Harbor." I put them on my bicycle and rode around the community. So they'd remember, don't forget, you know. In some of the issues there, everybody had a gas card, a sticker on your windshield, A, B, C, or whatever, what need you had for fuel. So you went to buy fuel, they knew how much you were authorized. Savings bonds, and you had to save up 10 foil, things like that. Oh, by the way, in this issue, I told you about the dog, but I had a cat, but it was a very functional cat. It took care of the rats under the house, never came in the house.
Did your family tell you any stories about your own parents or grandparents that we should remember?
I think I've already mentioned that.
Okay.
With Grandpa Henry. I did go with him one time and Grandma up to Alto, and we went up to Seneca, South Carolina to visit one of his sisters. But evidently Henry Clan wasn't very close because he went by to see his brother, Jim, and he wasn't home. That was it.
The next section, Pat, is school, early work, and military. What were school and your classmates like in your younger years?
Well, I was our lot backed up to my elementary school.
Oh, really?
I didn't go to school had a fence there, so I climbed the fence to play basketball or whatever after school. But going to school, I had to go around the block, and it was a fun time. It was a big yard, whatever. I enjoyed math and science, but you know, I wasn't the greatest student, but I did all right. I remember one thing, as far as a teacher goes, there was a Mrs. Dyer taught me in the 5th grade. She was an old lady. I guess she was probably 50. No, she was gray-headed. I don't know how old she was. She was old as far as I was concerned. But she had a nice spirit about her. But she decided that I was talking too much. And so she had me stay after school and write, "I will not talk in class." 100 times or what. I did it once, and I said, "Oh, okay, I got that message." But I don't remember any other teachers. I had some girlfriends. In fact, my first date was when I was 7. And I don't know how I got it, but the girl and her parents came by and picked me up. I say pick me up, walked me to the theater. It's about 2 blocks away. We went to see, and she bought me an ice cream cone. So my first date, of course, Aunt May had a field day with that. She was always teasing me about the girls and whatever else. She used to tell me how beautiful my eyelashes were, how long they were. Something happened along the way because they're not long anymore. I think she just pulled my leg, but anyway.
Did you have a favorite subject or teacher who influenced you?
No, I liked math and science, but I didn't have a favorite teacher in high school. They're all. I had one that was funny. Mr. Aaron. He was a math teacher, very proper fellow, and he was so proper that we decided to fake him a little bit. We would look at the ceiling, and he'd look at us looking at the ceiling, and we were trying to get him to look at the ceiling. When he did, we all snickered. He knew we had him. But you know, it was little fun things like that. Oh, I got another one. I was in my science class, and we had a substitute teacher. And the guys decided, well, you had to sign down your name. And then she'd take them and start reading the names off. John Paul Jones, Alan Jackson, or not Alan Jackson, but some current name. And I put and she'd go around and say, okay, what's your name? Well, it's not Jackson, it's Patrick Henry. And then I said, James Patrick Henry. And she came and said, James Patrick Henry. I said, yes, ma'am. Okay, that must be right. Because I didn't change my mind. But anyway, just childish things.
Yeah. What was your first job, and what did it teach you?
Well, I had my first job literally was with Uncle Joe. I was probably 11 or 12, just as a cleanup person while he did some not sheetrock, but wallpaper. And the thing about that is, take your money nicely. I never had people give me any money for my service, and I said, oh, gee, you don't have to do that. He said, okay. I said, oh, wait a minute, I didn't mean that. So take your money. But my first real job was at Colonial Stores. I started off as a bag boy. A month or two later, he asked me if I wanted to be a checker. I said, yeah, I'll be a checker. The thing I learned about that was the poor folks give the biggest tips. I'll never forget this. When an old boy had a cheapo Chevrolet and 5 kids, he gave me $1 tip or something, and the gal with a Cadillac gave me a nickel. So I come, she's got a Cadillac. She didn't give it to everybody else. But anyway, it was a disciplined job, and I didn't mind it at all.
How did you decide to join the Air Force?
Ooh.
And what was it like to serve?
Well, that was a good one. In those days, the military requirement for young adults, young boys, was a 2-year commitment. That's right after World War II. And so I knew I was having to go in, and in fact, the city of Atlanta had ROTC in high schools. And so I was in Army ROTC for 3 years. I knew what that was like, and I liked it, and I did well in it. But when I got to Georgia Tech, I said, now I got a choice, Army, Air Force, or Navy. And I said, well, I don't want to dig foxholes. That does not sound too good. And I couldn't swim too good. And I didn't like the idea of being floating out there. I'd read some stories about Guadalcanal and guys, ships getting sunk out from under them, floating out in the water at midnight, and maybe not finding them and whatever. I wasn't a good swimmer. I said, So I made a beeline. I was to the Air Force because it couldn't take everybody who wanted to go in there. So I was there well before times so I could get in line early. And I got in the Air Force. That was a good move. What was the other part?
And what was it like to serve?
Oh, well, I said, I'll be in the Air Force. You know, when you do that kind of stuff, you don't know if your eyes are good, your body's good, your mental capability is that good. You don't know what's safe. Anyway, got all through all that, and got into flying business, and I kind of liked it. And I said, well, maybe the Lord wants me to stay in the service. Sometime toward the end of the first year in flying school, they came along and said, would you like to apply for regular status? Because if anybody comes in initially as a reservist, unless you're a distinguished graduate or come out of academies. I said, yeah, I'll do that. I'll pray about it and see what happens. Well, I got to the next station and said, congratulations, you're now a regular officer. Oh, well, wonderful. I must be up to stay in a while. So I did that for a while, and then you want to go to the B-52s next?
Yes.
I got into the flying business, and let's see, it's a gap there from flying school to B-47s, and then missiles, and then the B-52s. When I got out of the missile program, they needed pilots, so they brought me back to pilot school. And that's where I met, where I got involved with Patty, but that's more detail later. get into the 52s. I went through Castle out there in California. I was a co-pilot, and immediately we went to Vietnam, over Vietnam. Went to Guam first, and this was the first aircraft that they had expanded to bomb bays and the colorations and all that stuff, prepared for activity over Vietnam. So I was a co-pilot, and on one we were over there for 4 missions, 3 times flying and 1 time in staff. So I think it was on the second mission over there. I was a co-pilot, and we were taking off out of Utapao in Thailand, and at night, and past Decision Point, and one of the engines on the left side blew. Of course, it was spectacular, lit up and everything like that. And the pilot, of course, kept us cool. And it was grounding in our head, so you want to make sure you shut down a correct engine. You got 8 of them, so don't pull a good engine off and exacerbate your problem. So I went meticulously, went through the gauges. Okay, this is okay. This is the bad one. 1, 2, 3, 4. I didn't go. I went meticulous, and then I pulled the throttle back, pulled the shut-off valve. Everything's cool. Flew the mission. It was a 7-hour mission. We was taking off out of Utah, like I said, 7-hour mission. It's no problem, it's just a little slower, no problem, flight right altitude. But my biggie was I was flying out of Kadena as a captain, as a captain of the airplane. Early one morning, about 5, and my tail gunner called up and said, and you can always tell when there's a problem, real problem, the voice changes. And he had a high squeal. Pilot, the tail's flipping 6 feet either way. And like I said before, my mind says, I don't have an emergency procedure for that. Because in the flying business, you got an emergency procedure for everything but that. And so I said, So we called in the command post and told them what's happening. They said, well, go over in an emergency lane, and did that. And we experimented with going too fast, and you could feel it in your rear end of the plane, boom, 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 boom. If you slow down, it was just every now and then. So I said, well, we can't figure that out, but you can't land right now because you're too heavy. 450,000 pounds, that's a lot of weight, and they was afraid it might drag the tanks when if you hit, bang them, or cause fires or whatever. So a wing may break off, who knows. So we went off into the drop zone and dropped our bombs, about 100 or so bombs, 500-pound bombs, and we didn't have a dispersal. You can't just jettison fuel on a B-52. You have to burn it off. So we went up and simulated landing and burned it off the fuel for 4 hours. It was a beautiful day. It's not a problem. So I came in for a long approach to land. And usually when you land after a mission, the plane is real light. It has a tendency to float. It didn't want to land. But in this case, it was about half load, and once you put it on the ground, it stayed. And that was a good thing. But of course, as Alan would know, and Patrick too, it's a challenge to you to put it on the ground when nobody feels it or feels a tug when you land. And of course, you get comments from your crew about how you landed. Yes, there is, Captain. It's rough weather out there when you bang it. But anyway, we did that, and from that we got a quarter of the crew for SAC Strategic Air Command and a Distinguished Flying Cross out of it. Didn't give me any more money, but at least you got some notification, and I praise the Lord for it.
Excellent, excellent. Pat, you told us a story about the tail on the B-52. Here are some pictures. Can you describe them to us?
Yes, this is my crew that was on the flight with me, and this is a picture for our being flight crew of the quarter for their Strategic Air Command, and the recognition of a Distinguished Flying Cross for all of us. This picture here is a vertical stabilizer that has a covering on it down at the base that holds a bolt that allows, when you remove it, to lower the tail to be serviced with maintenance normally. And this is a cover removed, and the pencil is pointing to where the head of the bolt was rubbing on the covering, trying to come out. And this is a picture of the boat halfway out of its mooring, and the portion here goes up to the tail itself. And secures the tail.
And then the covering kept it from coming out, and that kept the tail from falling over.
Right. And this is the end where the bolt should have been completely through and the nut attached. The nut which fell off is missing there. They took it after it fell out when they opened the covering.
What leadership lessons did you learn rising to the rank of colonel?
Persistence and do a lot of praying. I never strove to be a colonel. Always strove to be the best I could and leave the rest in the Lord's hands. And in fact, going overseas so many times, I was just struggling to make 20 years for retirement. And on our fourth trip over, I was in charge of the command post up in Massachusetts. And I came in one day and it said, you notice anything on the board? All the planes are off alert. I said, oh. I said, yep, they've been prepared to go overseas. I said, oh, do I have to go again? Nope, you're not on the list. And so every day you go to staff meeting, well, so-and-so's leaving, so-and-so's leaving. The next thing I know, I'm leaving. They call me and say, you got a classified assignment for you. I said, oh, I go over to personnel. They said, you're going to go over as a tanker briefer. I said, oh, you got the wrong guy. I'm a bomber guy. They said, you'll learn fast. So I went over. But in the meantime, I saw in Daily Bulletin, they were looking for guys to go into the missile program. This is strategic missiles. Like in Cheyenne, they have 200 strategic missiles for nuclear warfare if necessary. And I'd already been in the missile program. And it said only if you had 500 hours of time overseas. Well, I had 500 and I was going for another 180. So I put my application in because I was looking for some stability for the family. Wouldn't worry about careers, whatever. So I put that in. I get over to Thailand and I get a text message, or for that, it's not text message in those days, some kind of message. And it said, oh, you don't have enough time. Sorry about that. I said, that's crazy. So I picked up the phone and called SAC headquarters. And just so happened that I'd flown with this particular guy who was in charge of it now. And I said, hey, Chuck, what's happening? I said, I got 500 hours and I'm over here now. He said, oh, your records were wrong. I got it squared away. So the Lord provided. I got to go to Cheyenne, the missile program. And that allowed stability. And from there on, there's another story there because I was a squadron commander, had 100 officers under me and whatever, and I got good grades. And they said, you need to get higher headquarters experience. I said, how you do that? I said, well, we'll work on it. Well, the bosses didn't work on it because I got a call from SAC headquarters. This guy said, I'm looking at your record and I'd like to offer you a job as in charge of strategic timing. I said, where'd you get my name? He says, oh, Captain so-and-so, who knew you way back when. I said, oh dear. I said, that sounds interesting to me. So I was on a break. I was in the base exchange. So Patty and I and Chad drove over there and looking for a house. And before we signed the paper, I called the guy up and said, you didn't change your mind, did you? He said, no, the general approved it. I said, okay. So that's how I got that job. And that's subsequently how I made colonel.
Excellent. Pat, did you have any long-lasting friends from the military?
Yes, Colonel Tom and Sally McCormick. While in Omaha, Nebraska, when I made colonel, I knew Tom was up on the main level. I was in the basement with classified material and what have you. And so I went up to see him. I said, because it's typical in those days to celebrate, the new officers celebrating their promotion would have a party over at the bar or at the club. And I was determined that we not go over there and drink it up. At the bar, I wanted to have something that was more family oriented. So I went up to see Tom, and I told him what I was thinking about. He said, "I agree with you." I didn't know that he was a devout Christian. So when we get over there, there's about 11 of us that are going to talk about our party. And he was sitting across from me. I said, "I think we ought to have a brunch and invite the family." And he said, "Yeah, I agree." And everybody said, "Oh, yeah, that's not a bad idea." But as it worked out, it was a great party, celebrating, and it was sober, and the kids were there and all that kind of stuff. Well, long story short was, I got assigned to Malmstrom Air Force Base as a base commander, and Tom got assigned to Malmstrom Air Force Base as a chief of maintenance. So we had a couple years together up there, and of course they were devout Christians, and we found out a lot. They lived 2 doors down from us on the base, and then he retired, and I went on down to Cheyenne to be the commander down there, and Tom went down to Huntsville and worked for some supplier, and wound up going down to work for NASA. But long story short, his son was Roland's age, and they both went to Auburn together. And so it just so happened that Tom and Sally bought a house there, and we used to have celebrations at their house, one of which it was Melissa, and would have meetings at Sally's house for high schoolers and study the scriptures together. Of course, Sally loved it. Sally was a very devout lady, taught Sunday school, and very happy Southern Mississippi gal. And Tom was a devout fellow too. He subsequently died with a fall in the shower a few years ago, but Sally stayed there in Auburn. We celebrated Logan and Landon's graduation from college at their house. We celebrated Melissa and Meredith's graduation from her house. And the family has been really close to her, staying at her house for various functions over the years. And so just recently she decided that she'd need to be closer to her son, was out in Phoenix. So Sally McCormick is a saint.
Okay, our next section is faith and values. Why are you a Christian, and what does your faith mean to you personally?
Everything. Like I said before, I was saved at 8, went to church and all that, but it was just trucking along. Went to church, enjoyed church, but I wasn't. In my first 6 months in the service, I didn't go to church, didn't go to chapel. Nobody else was, so I didn't worry about it. And Mom and Dad came to see me in Bartow, my first flying school, and I knew they were going to go to church, so I went to church with them, and I went to the wrong time because I hadn't been going. And that was embarrassing. But anyway, after finishing that 6-month period, I said, I'm really not liking what's going on here. So I get to Big Spring, Texas, and I started going back to First Baptist Church. And I liked it. I felt comfortable. The guys were loving. And so I got switched up to Wichita, Kansas, and it was in the summer, and a bunch of guys from Baylor, guys a little younger than me, of course, but they were seminary students. Must have been 3 or 4 or 5 of them. And the Lord convicted me one night after a youth meeting. I was out in my car, and I said, "Okay, Lord, I'm tired of leading my life. I want you to lead it." I said, "Oh dear, I might go to Africa." You know, that's what everybody thought about when I was a kid. You should be a missionary going to Africa. But from there on, I sought service. Even there, I was just temporary. I was friendly with the pastor and all that, and they let me teach young 9-year-olds for a few weeks before I transferred out. I started tithing. going to church every time the door opened. When I got to Homestead, I got transferred down to Homestead, and I went to University Baptist Church. First of all, I went to First Baptist Church, and there were no young people one Sunday. The next Sunday, I went to University Baptist Church outside of University of Miami in Coral Gables. And there was a slew of them in there. And so I joined that church on a Wednesday night. And the pastor asked me to pray, which is very unusual. And Patty was in the crowd. She told me later. Of course, she was a teenager. And anyway, I took some leadership training. The youth minister asked me to be head up the youth committee. And Patty was a teenager representing high school. She sat across from me, and teenager. So we had meetings and stuff like that.
Were there times or seasons in your life where your faith deepened or faltered?
Well, I guess what I want to say about this, about the Christian faith, is that I may have mentioned before, is that I was convicted I wanted to serve the Lord, and I likened the Bible to the -1 in an airplane. It was a guiding force for marriage and the family. If you went by the Bible, that would be a priority in your life. Love God and love others would be the summary of the Ten Commandments. When you're under stress, I guess the biggest one was a third or fourth time over. I think this was the fourth time over. It was stressful for Patty because she couldn't go home with the kids anymore because they're up in age a little bit, starting school, and she was more distraught, and it made me that way. So I got closer to the Lord that way. I read the New Testament through. I initiated a Bible study class at our base when I could. I ordered some material from SBC, Southern Baptist Convention, and the idea was, when you're having trouble, get closer to the Lord. Bible study, fellow Christians, talk with fellow Christians, things like that.
What role did church and being a deacon play in your life?
It's a tangible result of your love for the Lord. I was chairman of deacons 3 times, and during one of those times, Patty says, "Why don't you start a widows' luncheon?" Well, the widows was started because of the widows not being taken care of. The deacons were started because the widows were not being taken care of in the early church. To take away the trouble it was causing the preachers. They want to let them focus on God's word. And so I brought that to the deacon body, and they agreed with it. And to this day, this has been probably 15 years worth. We have a luncheon for the widows. And we usually run about 80 to 100 widows.
That's here in Tallahassee.
Here in Tallahassee at Thomasville Road Baptist Church. And that was a tangible benefit. Now, other than that, day to day, we had hospital ministry, which I was on for years and years and years and years. In fact, I was there when the 9/11 happened. I was going between rooms and whatever, and someone said an airplane crashed in the Trade Center. And I went to the next room, and I saw it happen the second time. I said, "That's not an accident. It was clear weather. You couldn't say it was an accident." So that was it.
If you could share 1 or 2 Bible verses or lessons of faith with your family, what would they be?
Well, it's kind of the traditional one, I guess, John 3:16 and 17. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son. Those who believe in him should not perish but have everlasting life. And 17 is, where God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but the world through him might be saved. And then Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I've used John 3:16 off and on. When your mind gets tracked on something negative, or some curse word comes up in your mind, I start quoting John 3:16, and usually that takes care of it. But And we're bombarded with that on your computers and TV and radio all the time. So it's essential to stay close to the Lord.
How are you going to use this videotape as far as a witness to your family?
Well, as I said before, in the Bible it says, be ready to give an answer for your faith and whenever called upon. And in this case, what better situation that could I have but to do it for my family?
Did you ever work for the Gideons?
Yes. That was early on. We hadn't been married very long. We were up in Massachusetts, and had a Gideon there in the church, and I liked what they did, so I went through the procedures to become a Gideon. I went to a couple of churches and gave testimony, but I didn't, wasn't active. I got transferred and was too busy, but I was a member for about 20 years, active giving and praying, of course. But one of the things I loved about it, from a personal point of view, was the testimonies that people would give, or how the Lord through the Bible would convict people by being in a motel room or whatever, open to a certain verse, and the person needed that particular verse and how it changed their life. Just the Bible. It wasn't any expository preaching or whatever. And it just rang home to me how the Lord uses things that we would never think of. And the Lord works in mysterious ways to all be sensitive to His leading. Mm-hmm. And that comes from prayer and dealing with fellow Christians and other sources.
Let's move into your family and marriage.
Okay.
How did you meet Patty?
Well, as I said earlier, I was on this youth committee with her, and of course she was a teenager, and I was dating all the college girls and that kind of stuff. And one summer before I left, all the college girls left town, and some of us wanted to go out, and I called her, and she said, okay. And I went over and I met her, met Granny, and she was dressed very nicely. She had what do you call it, fluffy skirts and things. It's kind of, I've never seen that too much, but it's a very feminine thing. And she came with me, and a couple other couples. And the significant was she wasn't ready, and nor was I, but I might have been ready if she'd been a little bit more mature. But I drove up to the house to let her out. I was going to walk her to the door, and she just popped out. Well, thank you for the ride, and took off in the house. I said, oh, teenager. So anyway, I didn't think any more about it. And I went 3 years away to Mountain Home, Idaho, and I'm going to build a little case here, little scenario. While we were there at Homestead, there was a young lady came and joined our church, Carol Simpson, that was going to marry one of the fellows who had been in the church, but he was in the service at the time, Air Force. His name was Charlie Simpson. And we befriended her. She was very friendly. Patty knew her too as a teenager, but she knew her. And so I went to their wedding. I met him. And the long story there was, I was in missile training, the first missile school I went to. And in Wichita, Kansas, I was in church, and there was Charlie and Carol. I said, oh dear. We're going to the same base in Mountain Home, Idaho as a bachelor. And they had me over to their house 2-3 times a month for 3 years. They were so, Carol was so interested in us having the proper amount of tea. She got us a big glass each, and we did this. He and I would play tennis or whatever, talk cars and whatever, missiles or whatever. I give it background because a friend came through town that she knew from church. I'd been in contact with over years, but we had been friends with Patty too. She said, why don't you ever date Patty Lee Rowland? And I said, that's a good idea. In the meantime, Charlie inherited a little money. He had a wife and kid, and he bought an XT, he liked sports cars, in Miami, but he didn't know how to get it to Idaho. So I said, I'm going down there. I'll pick it up for you. Now that's the backdrop. I get the phone call from Mary Ann. She says, why don't you ask Patty out? Why you ever date her? I said, good idea. She's a devout Christian. She's cute, but she's not a teenager anymore. So I called her home, and she wasn't home. Her dad said she's in New York. I said, oh, okay. So I called her up, and I called her I called her one night, and she's right there. And I said, hey, Patty, this is Patty Henry. I'm coming to New York. How about a date? She said, oh, you coming up here? She said, I'll take 2 or 3 days off and show you around. I said, oh, she'd never done that with anybody before. I found out later. I said, oh, okay. I hope we get along. So I fly up there. I had to wear my uniform because you got half rate at that time. I flew to JFK, came over to the Trade Center, and I called her and told her I was coming. And I'll go out to get in a cab driver, and the cab driver said, where you going? I told her the street address. He said, oh, I live in that building. Out of 33,000 cab drivers, he lives in her building. I said, what? He said, that's where the nurses are. I said, what kind of reputation they got? And I was really attuned to what was going on. Anyway, long story short, he takes me up to the building. He says, oh, by the way, I got a key to the place. I'll let you in. I didn't know you had to have a key to get in the building, but I told her, I said, I was here, and she was looking for me. She saw me parked down there. He parked down there. So I went in, got in the elevator, and I went up, and she was there at the elevator door. She says, how'd you get in? And of course, that brought a little stir. And we went in. She said, okay, there's the couch, and I'll see you in the morning. We didn't talk about anything, past or future. I said, okay. So get up next morning, we're going to go to church. This was a Saturday night. And I don't know how we planned to do that, but we said, we're going to church. Okay. So she gets all dressed up. She had a new suit. I don't know if she bought it for me or what. She had a new suit. She looked real good. I said, class. In my mind, I said, class. I said, ooh. So anyway, we're just talking up a storm, and I wasn't defensive or whatever. She wasn't defensive. We were just being open. We go down, and her roommate worked for Ford. Her dad worked for Ford in Miami, and he'd given her a new car. And he said we could use it. There's a new Ford Falcon or something. Anyway, we go to Riverside Baptist Church, and we get there right at 11 o'clock, right, worship time, and there was parking space right in front, right across from the door. I said, man, this is something. All these things were clicking off. And we go into church, and it was wonderful. And we came back out, went back to the apartment, changed clothes, and went all over town all day, just having a great time. And so coming back from Staten Island Ferry, we went back to the rooms, and she says, I said, let's go sit on the couch. She said, let's lay on the floor. I said, okay. So we're laying on the floor there. She said, I want to talk about a faith. And man, that was a hot button for me, because that was what I've been crying for. Because preceding that, when I was 26 or so, I finally given over to the Lord. I said, Lord, you know my heart. I want to have a Christian family sometime. But if you want me to be a bachelor, you want me to do it that way, that's fine with me. But you know my heart. So all as a backdrop, all those years of praying, and she started talking about faith, and it started resonating with me. It was so powerful. I just said, if I had a better sense, this is my second night there, I'd ask you to marry me.
You told her that?
Yeah. And she said, oh, no, not that. I said, well, it is kind of bizarre, but I'll tell you what, let's pray about it. And I took her hand, and later on she told me when I took her hand, she knew I was serious. I didn't know I was serious, but I was just inspired. And I prayed. She didn't say nothing. And when we finished, she said, oh, we ain't eaten. She jumps up, goes in the kitchen, starts putting together. I said, well, man, she's good in the kitchen too. I said, well, what's not like about that? Well, long story. We had 2 or 3 more days there. We went to a fancy restaurant, went to a play, what have you. And amongst that discussion, I said, now this ties back into Charlie and Carol. I said, I'm going to be in Miami this Christmas. This is October. This is Christmas. She said, well, I'm going to be there too. I said, oh, really? She said, where are you going to stay? And I said, the base. She says, why don't you stay with me at the folks' house? I said, okay. And so she alerted her aunts and stuff, so she had 3 aunts in town. And so we went and had dinner with them, check around. And we had a great time. And then here comes Charlie and Carol to give me the car. And of course I said, well, since we're going to stay there and meet your folks, why don't we go to Atlanta and meet my folks? She said, okay. So we get in the car and we drove to Atlanta. Mom and Dad, and Aunt May and Aunt Frances had a great time. And when I dropped off the airport and I left, I said, I want to be with Patty. Because everything had clicked, everything had clicked. Now, I went through the little litany. I said, now, what else is there to prove? I'm going to go see her every 6 months in some place. Or just tell her you love her. Okay, that's a good idea. I called her, I told her I loved her, and she said, me too. I said, holy catfish, we're getting married. I said, well, I'll go back up in February and we'll get a ring. I went up there and of course, it was just wonderful. And as we went down to the Diamond District, and all these guys with skull caps on or whatever, and locked doors, and I didn't know the zip about diamonds. And I got her size of a ring. I said, tell you what, and she wasn't into rings and stuff. She just whatever I wanted to give her. I said, I'll give you the standard single diamond, and I'll go back to Mountain Home, Idaho, where this particular guy is known. He's not a crook or whatever, and get a ring and mail it to you. my grandchildren now just can't believe that happened. Well, I mailed it to her. I said, let's get married before I go out to B-52 school, which was going to start, I think, in May sometime. And she said, okay. And so that was the end of that. There's a start.
So that's how it all started.
That was
Now,
yeah.
how did it last 60 years, and what were the significant events?
God's help, but God's purpose. We were a team. When she said she would be my wife, I felt empowered because I didn't have to worry about what I was going to eat the next day. I didn't have to worry about my clothes. I didn't have to, all this other stuff is support my activity. I could focus on my job. She was a total team player. We could go to church together. I could teach, and she could work with the ladies, do the records. Just a total team effort. And it was a wonderful thing. I already mentioned about the deacons thing. That's just one minor thing, but she was involved in prayer ministry. She was involved in women's functions, vacation Bible school, Bible study fellowship, and we're one person, the one purpose together. And the Bible talks about not being unequally yoked. I've mentioned over time, over our 60 years, I couldn't stand the idea of my wife staying home and me going to church. That would just kill me. That was not happening. I would not marry a non-Christian, a lady who wasn't a Christian. I would not do that.
Excellent. What were some of the happiest times with Roland and Chad? Raising Roland and Chad.
Well, that's pretty easy. They were easy to raise. They were all very active in sports. We supporting them in every way we could, encouraging them, seeing them enjoy exercising God's gifts, whether it be sports or academics or their friends, seeing them accept the Lord at a young age. We did all kinds of trips with them, supporting them in soccer and what have you. That was great.
Okay. What were some of the hardest moments as a father, and how did you handle it?
I guess the hardest thing was going overseas, particularly last time, because both boys were getting up where they could recognize what was going on, and seeing them drive off, go back to Miami, and I'm going overseas. It didn't get easier. We went 3 years in a row, 6 months each. I was gone. And it was all that undecidedness of what we're going to be, because initially they said we're going over 6 months and be 2 years before we go again. But they kept upping the sortie rate. I mean, more airplanes had to be over there. And we didn't find it out till the last minute, and then send us over. And the last time was in staff, and but that was the hardest time.
Okay. How do you see your sons and grandchildren carrying forward the family story?
Well, we all once you make our decision for Christ, and we all have to make our own way. All we can do is encourage them and pray for them. And I've been very blessed that they've all followed their leading, his leading.
Now, Pat, we want to move to life's lessons and wisdom. Looking back, what are the things you're most proud of?
Well, the thing I'm most proud of, aside from my salvation, is Patty. Every day when I go out to see her at the nursing facility, I think about all how the Lord's blessed us, from regurgitating our wedding encounter, to soccer fields, to ministering to families, ministering to individuals. It's just, I'm just so blessed. And I think about that. I think of Proverbs 31:10 through 30, I think it's 31. It says, a wife of noble character who can find? And I couldn't find her. The Lord found her for me. He took the blinders off, her and me, but particularly me, because I just went by her as a teenager because I was not focused. But the thing was, it wasn't God's timing. When God's timing was right, it was right. And I'm just so thankful for that, because all the good things we've had, all the experiences we've had with the boys and their families, and how the boys turned out with their wives and their grandkids, how all of them are attractive, all of them are smart, all of them are not doing drugs and all that kind of stuff. They're in church. I'm just so blessed. I credit Miss Petty for a large part of that. Mm-hmm. She's cool. She doesn't get excited. She doesn't. She's not materialistic. She loves others, just like the Bible says. She loves God and loves others.
What are some mistakes you've made, and what did you learn from them? Well,
too many of them to list, but one of the big ones. I was so obsessed with my next job because I wanted to make sure that I got the boys through college. Some guys say when the kids get to be 18, they're on their own, and if they want to go to college, they can figure it out. I didn't feel that way. I felt I wanted to make sure the boys got a proper education, since my mama beat it into me that I should go to college, and I agreed with that. So I prayed about it, and I decided to buy a house. I was in command positions, and I had to live on base, and the inflation rate in '79 or so was 10%, 15%, and I couldn't save that kind of money. I was just making sure I could have enough to buy a house, much less having to fund kids through college. So I went ahead and bought a house. I didn't wait on the Lord. I bought a house. So as it worked out, I was progressing along in service. I made colonel, of course, and then I went up to Montana, and I was praying again. When should I get out? Because I knew I could stay in for 4 more years, but if I did, I'd get rolling through. But then Chad would be there, and then so I wouldn't be in that wing position that long. So I called the personnel. I said, "What you got in mind for me after my wing commander job, or my job up here?" And they said, "Probably down to 15th Air Force in a staff position." I said, "Oh, I'm not going to L.A., taking the boys down there, no way." So I put my papers in to retire on a Friday. And the next morning at 6:30, I get a call from a 3-star general down who was in charge of 15th Air Force, which has all the bases in the west half of the United States. And I'd known him, but he had never spoken a word to me. He'd come to my base before, and he talked to my boss. And he said, "Where you going? Where you retiring?" "I see you're retiring." I said, "Just going home, sir." He said, "Well, you screwed up my plans. I had you going down to Cheyenne as a wing commander." He said, "If you'll pull your papers, you can go down there in a couple weeks. I said, yes, sir. And Patty says, I hung up the phone, and she said, you're flaky. I said, yeah, I guess so, but I felt like I was the voice of God speaking to me. A three-star general never talks to a colonel like that, and if he thought I could be of some help with the mission, I was sold out on the mission to serve my country and my Lord. I said, I'm going to do it. Well, to her credit, she never complained after that. We went down to Cheyenne and did our job, and she was on board just like nothing ever happened. But she really would like to go home. But during that time there, a former member, a colonel, been a former member that had been was in charge of the Ford Aviation Department office, and we had a 3-day celebration there of the 20th anniversary of the 90th Strategic Missile Wing, and he was part of that. During that 3 days, we had a lot of conversations, and of course I'd been thinking, what am I going to do when I retire? I got to go be a teacher. I'm going to try to get on with the state. And I was thinking like that. And he said, I'm looking for somebody to replace me, somebody like you. I said, oh, yeah, right. I said, what's the requirements for it? He told me, I said, well, I'll meet that. So he called me the following Monday and said, if you're interested, see, I'll send you the resume I used 10 years ago, and you just fill in your particulars. I said, okay. So I did. Now that set off a discussion with Patty. She said, oh, I'm going to Detroit. So we started praying about that, and we talking to Christian friends, a pastor friend, Bill Rose, Colonel Bill Rose, chaplain. And I said, if I'm offered the job, if I don't take the job, are you willing to, Patty, are you willing to reactivate your nursing certificate and work a little bit just in case, I have a hard time getting a job because the boy's about ready to go to school. She said, no, I don't feel like that at all. I don't feel they'd do that at all. I said, well, if we get this offer, I know where we're going. So I got the offer, and there we went, right in the middle of Roland's senior year. As it worked out, we found a little Southern Baptist church about a mile from the house. And so, as always, that was the anchor of our time there. As most cases, Friday you're down into drugs, and then you go to church. The activity of the deacon there, I was all pumped up again to go back to work. So that's what we did there.
And that was at Ford Motor Company.
Ford Motor Company, and just so happened they were coming out of a recession, and the Lord took care of the finances for the boys. So that was a blessing.
If you could live your life over again, what would you do differently?
Not too much. One of the things was probably I'd be a little bit more searching for my career path at school. When I went to Georgia Tech, it was pretty much following my brother. William was the ace in the family. Everybody loved him. Talked about his successes, and he was going to be an engineer. And I said, I didn't want to go to Georgia State, and engineer sounds good. He said, what kind of engineer you want to be? And I said, I don't know. I liked electrical engineering, the electrical shop. So my first year at Georgia Tech, I took the engineering courses and then got into engineering physics, and I just didn't really like it. So I said to myself, I'll go to administration and see if they could give me an interest test. Well, what I've done differently, I would have taken that test in high school. And that would have made it simpler, because since I didn't take a test other than my first year and sophomore year, I had to, only took 15 hours or something like that. So I had to take 23 one quarter and 22 several quarters to make up for that loss of time in industrial management, like Alan did industrial management. But I finished on time. So that's one of the things I would have changed. I would take that interest test sooner.
Okay.
But the other part, it was pretty much the Lord's doing, because I did a prayer. I felt like my assignments were what the Lord would have me to do, even though I bumped around a little bit, but I'm very blessed.
What has life taught you about dealing with success and failure?
Don't get too high, don't get too low. And know if things are down, you keep praying, there's a life on the other side. Because I've seen people over the years who are non-Christians, they lose a job and they're in despair. I've seen Christians lose a job, they're not happy about it, but they know the Lord's got something else for them. As long as they do the best they can and leave the rest in the Lord's hands.
Mm-hmm.
That's been my mantra.
Okay. What's the biggest lesson you've learned about people?
People, by and large, are good folks that need direction and to show that you care. And you know, if you have those who aren't trustworthy, you work and go over there. But practice what you preach,
Mm-hmm.
and that gives you credibility, integrity, so they can trust you.
Pat, we want to go to the next section, which is advice for the next generations. What advice would you give to your grandsons and grandchildren about becoming men and women?
It's too late. They're already men and women.
That's true too.
Well, not really. Focus. Focus on what's godly. What love God, love others, and that's the issue. How do you do that? You get involved in a local church, your Bible study, and love others, and whether it be in the church or outside. But that's your base. That's where your strength is serving others in church, getting refurbished, refilled on your scriptures, and encouraged by your pastor and your fellow Christians. You base your working friendships around godly people who encourage you and strengthen you, because we're all bombarded with awful stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not getting any better.
What advice do you have for managing money wisely over a lifetime?
Well, I'm not a good money manager, but the bottom line is spend less than you make. Financial discipline. Always save something, and stay away from debt, except for maybe a house or a car initially, but always strive to stay out of debt, especially credit card debt. That's deadly. If you need it that bad, you don't need it. You're exceeding your capabilities.
How should a person prepare for retirement financially, emotionally, and spiritually?
Pray about it. Always save for rainy days. I've already mentioned all that. How can you glorify God? And let's see, my cousin Allie Webb and her husband both. She was a professor at Georgia in social work, and she and Eb, her husband, did a study on people who were had a hard time adjusting to civilian life after the military. And the premise was that a lot of people didn't have were so involved with the military that they had a hard time adjusting. In fact, a lot of guys just go right outside the gate and buy a house and keep coming back to the base. I had no such problems with that. And if anybody's a devout Christian, not focusing on the base for their support, they're focusing on what the Lord would have them do, whether church, local church, you're on a mission. As Patty always said, present time is our business address, and our heaven is our home. So we're all on mission right here, on business, God's business. So your same purpose that drove you in your work life will do in your retirement life. And each phase is different. Like now with Patty in a nursing home, I have to readjust to more single type thing, but to get closer to the Lord with daily Bible study and prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And you find lots of opportunities with others who are struggling, like in the nursing home, but the families coming in and want to share. So there's always opportunities as long as you're a Christian to serve others.
Okay.
Practice what you preach.
What's the best way to live a life of integrity and honor?
Focus on the Lord. Focus on the Lord. Practice what you preach.
And pray for the Holy Spirit.
Pray for the Holy Spirit. And be patient. That's one of my, maybe it's a Henry trait, maybe it's a human trait. I don't have a lot of patience.
Mm-hmm. Now let's switch over to world, politics, and society. What changes in the world have surprised you the most in your lifetime?
The fall of the Berlin Wall.
Okay.
Growing up and seeing the wall go up and this threat of nuclear war and to see the wall go up, there's no way you could have written a book to say that wall was coming down without a shot being fired. And it did. And you say, well, how in the world that happened? Well, I think prayer had something to do with it. The moral degradation of a communist system doesn't work because they don't have God involved. They're just human beings making decisions, and the fallacies and the integrity of it's not there. It's just all about them, and so that was it. The Berlin Wall. That was the biggest one.
What's the biggest improvement you've seen in the country?
Well, there's been jillions, but the biggest communication is communication. When I was raised, where I was raised, we had one radio in the house. Grandpa had a radio in the dining room in a corner, and we never listened to it. He listened to it, WSM, the country music station, on Saturday night, and that's the only time we had it on. We had a telephone in the hall on a little pedestal, and it was the kind that had a base with a long handle to it and the speaker portion and the thing you took off the hook and put in your ear. And it was not a party line, because a lot of them had party lines, but that was our communication. And so we've had from there, you've seen, I saw my first TV when I was probably, it was probably about 10 or 15, somewhere in there. And it was a helicopter set about 8 inches, and it was in a appliance store. They stuck it in the window, and you can go down and look at it. That was the first time I ever saw one. And of course, what we saw was a canned picture of strobes and stuff, and that was it. Then, of course, from all that, you got computers, iPhones, Wi-Fi. It just goes on and on and on. And you got to fiber network, and it's just communications in general has just gone crazy. Mm-hmm. Laser lights and stuff. Mm-hmm. Is mind-boggling.
What worries you the most about the future of America?
Secularism, godless secularism. It causes a vacuum, and you can see it not only here, but you see it far from Europe. Christianity built Europe, all these beautiful churches and hymns and things, and built freedom, built republics type of democracies, and they're turning their backs on it. And so what comes in is communism. What comes in is Islamic people coming in. They're going to control the place and make it like Egypt or Saudi Arabia or whatever with dictators. It's secularism.
Pat, what lessons do you think young people should learn about government and politics?
Government is not the answer. God's word is the answer. God, Christian friends, but we Christians should be involved. We're striving for perfection, and no one is perfect for sure, including ourselves. But the problem we've had recently is that one party is so so godly, it's pretty clear. But even the one in power now is not perfect. but it stands for principles that that we should care for, and that should be the premise of any vote. We should look at the person who has the best godly worldview and vote for that person. Because if you don't vote, you're really letting the bad guys, the people who are godless, vote rule over you. And it's not. I don't think is what Christians should do. We're not supposed. We're our business address. We should conduct our business.
Mm-hmm. Now, you spent your career serving the country in the military. How do you think your grandchildren and great-grandchildren should serve their country if they're not in the military? This is a new question.
Yeah. Well, that's dependent on their relationship with the Lord, how the Lord leads them. And like I said before, with God's worldview, you got to make sure you got the godly worldview and not just saying, well, he doesn't talk very nice, or he doesn't treat others properly. You get the best option you can.
How should we as a family prepare for changes in world affairs?
Godly worldview. Godly worldview.
Okay.
Love God, love others.
All right. The next section is legacy and reflection. What do you hope people will remember most about you?
That he was faithful to his God, his calling.
If you could write your own life motto, what would it be?
Love God, love others.
What do you want your grandchildren to tell their children about you?
He was faithful to his calling.
Okay. What advice would you give to someone who wants to live to be 90 and still enjoy life?
Don't focus on age. Focus on purpose. The Lord will dictate. Don't focus on age. I've seen so many people over the years. Well, I've got to be in shape. I got to take these medications and improve my molecular structure and whatever, so I can live to be most I can be. And the purpose should be focused on what God has in mind for you, whether it's be 60 or whether it be 100. The numbers, as I used to say, is just a number. Mm-hmm. And it's a quality of life that counts, and your quality of life is determined by your relationship with the Lord.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
In my view.
Now, how about some fun and lighthearted questions? What was your favorite car, motorcycle, boat, or RV?
Well, that's easy. My 63 Corvette, white, red interior, fuel injection, 4.11 rear end, positive traction. I really enjoyed that car.
I also remember you had a Winnebago.
Had a Winnebago, but that was functional. I enjoyed it, but boy, was it trouble.
Okay.
I had all kinds of trouble with that, if you want to hear that. Yeah, I bought it brand new, and one of the first things happened was the radio started leaking. I mean, leaking, spewing out. Okay, I took care of that. Then the axle started leaking up with grease. And then I got to running down the road at 4,000 miles, the engine blew. Kaboom! We're outside of Memphis. I was towing a Volkswagen. So we prioritized what needed to go in the Volkswagen and took on off because we were heading for school, missile school. And they put a new engine in, and I went back and flew back, and I drove from Memphis to California and slept 4 hours. Pulled off the side of the road in the west area and slept 4 hours. And I wouldn't advise that again because the last few roads were on 2-lane roads, snaky, just at night. But I was determined to get to my family.
Okay, get there itis?
Yeah, get there itis.
What's the best trip you ever took?
Well, I had lots of great trips, but the best trip was our 50th wedding anniversary to Montana. Okay. We took all the family up there. We all went up together, went up to Great Falls, and we buzzed around the base and regurgitated things like that. And then we went up to Lake Glacier Park, beautiful weather. Some of the families, Chad, Jenna, Laney and Jackson, Logan and Landon, went to Highline Trail, which is a spectacular right on the top of the Continental Divide. They camped out in a cottage up there. We went to Canada, The weather was beautiful, and we came home, and a famous saying from Jana as we got here to Atlanta, she says, you know, I had a great time. It says, we're still speaking to each other. I said, gee, that's odd. I never thought about that. Because we never had conflicts any times. So I guess some people have conflicts when they get together. But that's another blessing of, I thank the Lord, because my family, when I was growing up, we never had conflicts. We had disagreements, but nothing to write home about.
Who made you laugh the most in your life?
Patty.
Patty. Tell us a story or two.
Oh dear. Well, we were riding across the Mojave Desert. What happened was we we had finished 52 school and we were driving to Georgia. And then the engine blew up on that car, and we had to get towed in and got a new engine, and it was hot, like 110 degrees. We got the car from the shop about noon. It was about 110 or whatever, no air conditioning. And we started driving toward Needles from Barstow. And Patty had pulled her dress up over her knees, which is great. And she spread out like this, spread out. And I reached over to touch her, and she said, "Don't touch me!" I said, "Why? I said, I'm so hot." Her eyelid, it was so dry, but it's so hot, your eyelids hurt. And I started laughing. I thought that was the funniest thing. "Don't touch me!"
If you could eat one meal every day for the rest of your life, what would it be?
I guess a hamburger,
A Big Mac,
a Big Mac,
a Whopper.
a Whopper. On Friday at Westminster, they have a hamburger Friday. And you just address it the way you want. They got a bar out there, and they got salsa, not salsa. They got cheese and onions and lettuce and all kind of stuff. And you can jazz it what you want. And that would be it.
Okay. Any final words?
Praise the Lord.
Amen to that.
Thank you for going to all the trouble to record all this.
No problem whatsoever.